Hi there, 5 minutes. Now, restrictions on police officers using stop and search powers, they're set to be lifted by the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, she says, in an effort to tackle violent crime, most obviously knife crime. Police officers, they'll be able now to conduct stop and search if they anticipate, and it's slightly technical, but it's important, that violence, quote, may occur, rather than the current rules where they had to prove violence will occur. Completely different burden of proof. Well, that's after the changes being made to Section 60 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act. The move, perhaps you might expect this, it's been criticised by campaigners who say relaxing restrictions could compound discrimination against minority ethnic groups and add to a sense of being racially profiled. Join me now, Nick Buckley, former Youth Intervention Officer and former CEO of the Mancunian Way charity. Nick, welcome to you. I, at the top of the last hour, sat in the middle of a conversation between two extremely well-meaning and certainly in one instance, campaigner who'd been on the receiving end of a horror story. She'd lost her grandson to knife crime. And I've moderated so many of those debates over the years with people who feel really strongly about this. But it will seem to many of our viewers that the data's incontrovertible on this, incontrovertible. When you do the stops, knife crime falls.
Yes, it's common sense. The issue is the race angle to it. That's the issue to all this. And when we talk about stop and search, that's when the race baiters and the race hustlers all come out and start screaming about racism. But the truth is, anti-racism in this case kills young black men.
I was saying to one guest, in a world, when you've got police forces with body-worn cameras now, the old claim that stuff's happening behind the scenes, away from public scrutiny, that can't happen anymore, though he did say, actually, an officer can choose when to turn on the camera.
Officers can choose, but a sensible officer would be turning it on all the time because he'd want to back up everything he says and everything he does. I've been stopped and searched when I was younger. I lived on a council estate, extremely rough council estate. I was stopped and served quite a few times. It happens. It's not nice. I used to work with the police out on a Friday, Saturday night, driving around tough neighbourhoods, stopping and searching young people, looking for knives, looking for drugs. And when you don't have anything on you, it's a slight, it's disrespectful. I understand how you feel when you've been stopped and you've done nothing wrong. But what young people need to understand, and what parents definitely do understand, is we're trying to save those lives. We're trying to save your son's life. So a few seconds of discomfort may save his life or save someone else's life. And this is what this is about, saving young lives.
Nick, when do you think it happened that we moved from a situation where if two young men disagree with each other, they, kick seven bells out of each other? And when did that stop being the case and it was replaced by pulling a knife on someone and stabbing them to death?
Part of it's culture, changing culture, looking at, America. Part of it is immigration. We've got immigrants into the country who that's their normal culture, carrying knives, violence. So those things have happened. But then we've also had the fear of the police of stopping people. So when I work with young people now who have never been stopped by the police and searched, who don't know anybody who's ever been stopped by the police and searched. So they're walking away saying to themselves, I might as well carry a knife because I'll never get searched. The media tell me all the time that everyone else has got a knife, so I best have a knife. So it is one of those positive feedback loops.
Nick, it's quite an assertion, and some people will be outraged by the suggestion, you just made it, that sometimes, and I'll phrase it carefully, that we've imported this problem. Is that what you're saying?
Partly, not 100%, but partly it is, we have imported part of this culture as well. Absolutely.
And it will certainly strike me that, as you've already indicated, if the only measure that matters here, the only measure that matters, is fewer mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters getting a knock on the door from a police officer saying, we've got some bad news. But except it isn't all that matters, is it? We know this debate's been raging for years. There is a huge political dimension to it. Organisations, I suppose, like Black Lives Matter feed into it and muddy the waters.
Yeah, there's a simple answer to this that I've been talking about for 10 years. The simple answer is we take the politics out of it and we say to communities, would you like more stop and search or would you like less stop and search of your young people? And we ask them the question. We ask that question every year at the local elections with a separate ballot paper, so it doesn't cost the councils really anything more. And we get an answer every year. And I can guarantee every inner city neighbourhood will be voting for more stop and search because all they care about are the lives of their children. And that takes some of the steam out of this because we're letting parents and people decide. It takes some of the power away from the race hustlers who use this just as an excuse. Let's give the power back to the people who live in those neighbourhoods, who walk those streets and whose children are in danger. Let's give the power back to them. And whatever they decide, that's what we go with because it's their lives.
Nick Buckley, always appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Ella Whelan's alongside me. Nick speaks plainly. He'll rub some people up the wrong way with some of the things he has to say, but there is a germ of truth, it seems to me, in a lot of what he says.
Not in relation to importing the issue, because the knife crime attacks that we've seen from terror attacks, for example, which I think is what he's alluding to, are in the grand scheme of things, recent phenomenon. Knife crime has been an issue far longer than that. I think that's a bit of a reductive point. But I just want to put it this way. During the pandemic, this is a weird comparison, but go with me. During the pandemic, we were told by lots of people who were comfortable with infringing upon civil liberties, that this was to do with saving lives, that you had to be locked up at home because you were killing granny if you weren't otherwise. And it seems to me that you can quite easily transplant this to the knife crime discussion, which is to say everybody understands that there has been a rise in knife crime. Everybody, I think, is as frightened as the two of us are about how dystopian this has become and don't want, in particular, young men, who's the main people who are dying from this, to be killed. But to say to predominantly large sections of young black men, your civil liberties have to be compromised in order to save lives, many of whom will have never gone near a knife in their life, and who, it's happened to my cousins, who have the most upstanding citizens, and being accosted and interrogated by a police officer is something that no citizen should have to do without cause. That no citizen should have to suffer without reason. And the change from will to may in the law here is really quite, is doing a lot with one word. But and then the inference of that body cameras and extra police surveillance would make this better. I mean, Nick says we're handing back freedom to people. What we're doing in the context of Priti Patel's grand sweep of clampdowns on civil liberties, from the protests, the things in protest in the Police Crime and Courts Bill, to other areas of life. We're seeing an attack on civil liberties. This is happening to young black men in the context of knife crime. And what I would plea for is a bit of balance, which is saying we have to deal with this, but do we have to throw young black men's civil liberties under the bus in the process?
Is there not a way of just saying, very, very loudly and very clearly, from next week, if you're found to be carrying a knife, we are going to throw the book at you. Really, it's kind of like all your youthful fun is over. You're going to an institution, and that's that. We're giving you lots of advance warning. We're coming down really heavily. I mean, are there not other ways of deterring? There
are other ways of deterring it. I mean, I thought the beginning discussion you had between Ken and Julie at the start was, very interesting, could have gone on for longer, because what Ken was talking about is something that doesn't often get talked about, which is the involvement of communities in people's lives. So often or not, we think that, what happens when a kid has a knife found on them? We have to send them to a psychologist to find out what's going on in there, or we have to send them to a therapist, or, and he's saying, throw the book at them, longer jail sentences. You have a very clear...
Ella, we need to be able to talk about some of the reasons behind that as well.
Yeah,
I mean, family breakdown, sometimes the culture's pretty lousy, right?
Yes.
Where's Dad? Where's Dad?
Yes, but instead of saying, let's pack you off to a therapist, we ask more broadly, what are the problems within society at large? And it's not just down to the kind of nuclear family thing, though I think that plays a very important role, father figure within the community, whether it's grandparents or uncles or something like that. But it's also, there are larger things at play here with antisocial behaviour, which is that we don't have neighbourhoods who are in contact with each other. I see it on my own estate when I grew up, the young people run riot, and whenever an older person comes along and tells them to just shush, they have kind of the answer back, and there's not that intergenerational relationship. There's a whole soup of a mess of things going on, but it just seems to me to use this blunt instrument of the law, which Kit Morehouse calls it, blunt instrument, to be able to clamp down. It's a terrible thing to use, but that's the comparison. To clamp down on people's civil liberties in this way is no solution for anyone who's got a bone of freedom-loving bone in their body.
Which you have.
Many.
Heather, thanks very much.